I'm Christy Hemingway, host of Ed Curation, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Dutchko. Ninth grade can be challenging. Let's experience it together. And today's episode is going to be sharing a story with you about somebody that overcame challenges in their life that maybe in the ninth grade seemed like they were ready to have it all. They had some ups and downs in their life, but is now making huge positive changes in the world based on the book that he wrote and the story that he tells. So today's guest is Damon West. He's the author of The Coffee Bean, and it's a really inspirational tale of what happened to him as he was in the process of going to jail, which we talk about in the story. But now he has overcome that experience, and he's out giving motivational speeches to people about being an agent of change and about making the world a better place through your actions and through what you do. So I think this is a really important story to share with students in ninth grade, because it doesn't necessarily mean what you happens in ninth grade is where you're going to end up. And there's always the chance to overcome that and to work to better yourself. So Damon's story is truly awesome. And I'm glad that he was able to take the time with us to be able to share the story and to share some tips and strategies for our ninth grade students out there listening to this. So here is the episode featuring Damon West. So thanks a lot for joining us on today's Ninth Grade Experience Podcast. So I have a special guest with me today, and I was just recently at a conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I saw that this guy was going to be the keynote speaker of the last day of the conference. And I had heard his name before, and I knew that he was associated with John Gordon, who's a very popular author. So I'd heard about The Coffee Bean. I'd heard about Damon West. So I read his book, and the book was awesome. And I reached out to Damon to talk to him, and we were just kind of chatting, and his website didn't work. And somehow I was the one that figured this out for him. So while he is in the middle of this busy touring schedule, talking about The Coffee Bean and what he does for a living, he's able to fit in a little bit of time for us here today. So author of The Coffee Bean, I have the book here. Hopefully it shows up. I'm all kind of shady there. But so Damon West is joining us today on the podcast. So Damon, thanks a lot for joining us.
Man, Chris, thanks a lot for having me, man. Thanks for making the time for me. And thanks for taking the time to come up and talk to me at that conference in Pennsylvania. I mean, without you doing that, man, my business is still kind of shut down because people couldn't find me. But you let me know there was a glitch. You fixed it. And I felt like there's a bigger reason why we're supposed to have this podcast today. And I think someone out there is going to get help with this message.
And I appreciate you saying that. And even you told the story on one of the other things I listened to, and you told the story about how when you were getting started as an author, you kind of had a similar-ish moment where you were at a big conference. You were, you were trying to approach all these different people to talk to you and like talk about your story that you have. And it was the last person that you talked to who just happened to be Dabo Swinney, who is the coach of Clemson's football team, who kind of took the time to listen to you. And with him letting you tell your story to his team, you have kind of become this large like speaker to organizations and teams and all sorts of stuff. So it is interesting, like our stories kind of mesh up there. But I'm just speaking to the people that are listening to this. You've spoken probably last week, you spoke to like 5,000 people just in person, probably more. So we're really excited to have you. So we always ask our guests, the first question is, what was your ninth grade experience like? And I know that your ninth grade and your high school story kind of blends and bleeds into the rest of your story, which is an amazing tale. So why don't you take us back to ninth grade? You don't have to tell us where or when. Usually we tell that to the adults because if they don't want to share how old they are, they don't have to. But if you want to share that, you can. So what was your ninth grade experience like?
Man, my ninth grade experience. So first of all, I grew up in Texas, a little town. I don't mind saying Port Arthur, Texas is a town I grew up in. And you've probably heard about Friday Night Lights. Friday Night Lights, high school football in Texas. It's a very big deal. And I was the quarterback. And growing up in Texas playing football was a big deal. So whenever I came into ninth grade, there was this mixture of like excitement, a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of fear, because there were a lot of expectations on me as an athlete to step up into this role that, look, I knew I'd been preparing for it and I knew I was ready for it at some point, but it's a whole different level. The game got a lot faster. But a lot of the kids that I was going to school with, we grew up together. Here's what I had an advantage. I thought about this question when you asked me earlier. There's 2 junior highs in my hometown, and there's 3 different high schools, but there's 2 junior highs. And I went to both junior highs throughout the course of my junior high career. I went to one of them for sixth grade and 7th grade, and then I transferred to another one for 8th grade. So when I got to high school, Chris, I knew everybody. Like everybody kind of comes together in high school from the different junior highs.
Yep.
But I knew everybody. So it was really like that was an easy landing point for me. The hardest thing for me was the math class that I had, and it was algebra 2. I think is what I took in the 9th grade. I can't remember if it was algebra 2 or yeah, it had to be algebra 2. I remember math in 9th grade was really hard, and I was in the gifted and talented program, and so I remember not being ready for high school math. And when I got to the high school math part, my freshman year, it was bad. I made some C's, and I wasn't used to making C's, but math was the big thing that shook me in 9th grade. And honestly, Chris, to this day, I'm not great in math. And I think 9th grade was kind of a pivotal point for me because I kind of laid it down as far as math goes. I did just what I was needed to get by. And I got out of gifted and talented after 9th grade, probably because of math. If I think about it really hard, if I'm being honest, probably because the math requirements to stay in gifted and talented.
So that's interesting. Usually a lot of times, and I'll ask this one as well too, but not a lot of times when we talk to adults that they focus on like the academics that are in the classroom as like something that they vividly remember. But like, so you talk about you were in this math class, you may have felt a little overmatched, and like you kind of, maybe you didn't have dreams of doing stuff math related, but it kind of like knocked you back from doing math things or being like in a math class like that. So like, how did you like academically recover and kind of move yourself forward with your academic story?
Yeah, so I focused on the parts of academics that I was good at. I was naturally a pretty good writer. My father was a journalist, a sports writer for 50 years. And so I think I got that some of that from him, just naturally. So writing, reading were my strong points, and I would focus on that. I made decent grades. I mean, I still graduated with like a 4.1 on a 5-point scale. So I wasn't like the top of the class. I think I graduated, I don't know. I was in the top 25% of my high school graduation 4 years later. But I just focused on the class I was good at. But here's the other thing too. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I was a great athlete. I mean, as far as sports goes, and sometimes in societies and in schools, we do athletes a disservice by treating them differently because they can throw a football really well, or they can catch a football really well, or they play a sport really well. And that's kind of the preferential treatment I got whenever I was in high school. But look, I mean, did I shy away from that? No. I mean, I kind of leaned into it because, I mean, you're the quarterback, you get the special treatment, you play football. It didn't do me any favors later in life when accountability was held because of the content of my character and not the way I could play a sport, which, by the way, when I was in college playing Division I college football, I eventually got hurt and the football wasn't there anymore. And then, you know, my story kind of spins out of control after that. But in the 9th grade, I had immense popularity, so I wasn't worried about that. I was a very popular guy because of sports, but mathematics, again, was my weak point. I'll tell you another class I got into, but this was like a year later, was physics. Even though I wasn't that good in math, I had a friend in the class who would help me with the formulas and the math part. But I love physics. I love watching see way things change whenever they're introduced to another element. So, but 9th grade was hard, man. But I focused on the things that I was good at: reading, writing.
So you mentioned like the Friday night lights, like, you know, up here in the Northeast, like obviously we have high school football, but it does not rival what it's like in Texas. So we see like the shows like Friday Night Lights or the movies and kind of imagine, or you see like all clips on like, you know, TikTok of these like 14,000 seat high school stadiums. Like, so when you walk into that as a freshman, what was that like to be able to like absorb all that and then kind of A, deal with the pressure, and then B, kind of, I know your story as you kind of go through your high school years starts to kind of, you know, change a little bit, and you were exposed to some things that maybe led a little bit later to some of the things that happened to you and the decisions and kind of led to what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. Freshman year, and this is going to sound, I don't know, I guess shallow, but it is what it is. I looked at my freshman year of ninth grade in high school as a stepping stone to getting on varsity. So in Texas, they have different levels of sports. Like you have a freshman football team, you have a junior varsity football team, then you have a varsity football team. So typically the progression is your freshman year, you play in the freshman team, then your sophomore year, you play in the junior varsity team, and maybe you make it to varsity your junior year, but definitely your senior year, you get on varsity. My goal was always to play that freshman year, light it up as much as I could and be the starting quarterback my sophomore year on the varsity team, which is what I eventually did. So I focused on football really hard. People that read my book, The Change Agent, they get a lot of this story in there. Like I knew I wanted to be a college football player, and I knew that if I was going to get out of my small town, football was my ticket to do it. So I was all in on football, Chris. I mean, I got up in the mornings, and I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning in high school, went and ran. I went through. I had a tire swing in the field across the street from my house. I would throw footballs through the tire swing every single day. I'd be up in the morning running. I'd be up in the morning lifting. I'd be up in the mornings watching game film for the teams we're going to play that next week. I just took football very seriously. I didn't find anything else in life that I really sunk my teeth into like football, because I knew football was my ticket out. And so I got really good at my craft by getting my reps in. And, I look back on it, man, if I'd have just focused like that on math, I probably would have been decent at math. But it's Texas. My priorities were different back then. And I look back on it. And, Chris, this is a little side note to the mentality of the person you're talking about in high school. Tell you how stupid I really was. Like I was really good in football, and I got a lot of offers to a lot of schools to play college football, to play quarterback. In the end, I took a scholarship to play football at the University of North Texas, a Division I college football program in Denton, Texas. And I turned down Brown, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I turned down all the Ivy Leagues because what do I want to go play Ivy League football for? I want to play football in Texas.
Yeah.
And I mean, I look back on this now and I'm like, oh my God, I just passed up an Ivy League education to play football at a school in North Texas in Texas that was pretty insignificant when it comes to college football. But that's where my priorities were back then, Chris. And I was so wrapped up in being a football player. The problem is with this, and I hope everybody's getting from this, you can extrapolate. My identity was wrapped up at being a college football player. And I'm setting myself up for a big failure later on in life, because anytime we wrap our identities up into something external, we can lose ourselves along the way, because anything external can be taken away from us at any point. This is like, in life, if you're an adult, your identity doesn't come from the car you drive, the house you live in, the clothes you wear, the job you have, those aren't your identity. If you're younger, you're watching this, you're listening to this, your identity doesn't come from the friends you hang out with, the house that your parents live in, the socioeconomic background you come from in life, TikTok, social media. That's not where your identity comes from. It has to come from a place of within. But I didn't spend that freshman year or those high school years cultivating the identity from within. And it was setting myself up for failure.
So, obviously, if we had you on and we were going to talk about your future NFL career and all these other things, we would have mentioned that at the front here. So obviously there's a change to the story here that led you down a path that, had you had some interesting life experiences that allowed you to, you went to the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So, you have this book, you have this like talk that you do. So obviously the story changes at some point. So can you kind of let our audience in on, obviously you didn't make it to the NFL, and obviously you're not like this grand football star that made it to the, far. So what happened?
Yeah. So playing football in North Texas, I was 20 years old, starting quarterback for a Division I team, redshirt sophomore year, which means my third year of college. Third game of the season, I'm finally starting, man. And this is it, man. This is where I've arrived in life, because this is what my identity is. Third game of the season, third play of that game, I go down and it's a career-ending injury. I separated my shoulder and I never played college football again. And when I got up to this fork in the road in life and football was gone, again, my identity was gone with it. And I made a lot of wrong turns at this fork in the road. And here's the thing. I couldn't live life on life's terms. I didn't have a fallback plan. And I started getting into drugs at this point. And the hallmark of addiction is really when you can't live life on life's terms, you put chemicals in to change the way you feel. And that's what I did. And I was a functional addict, eventually graduating college. And then I worked some big jobs, as a functional addict. I worked in the United States Congress. I worked for a guy running for president. I worked in one of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world. But it was that job at a Wall Street bank as a stockbroker that I was introduced to crystal meth for the first time back in 2004. And 1.5 years later, 18 months later, I'm homeless, living on the streets of Dallas, and I become a criminal to feed my addiction. And I start breaking into people's homes. And these home burglaries went on for 3 years. And the Dallas SWAT team finally caught me in 2008 when they raided the house that I was in. The next year, I went to trial, and a jury sentenced me to life in prison in the Texas prison for organized crime. And it was in between the time when I got sentenced to life in prison and the prison bus came to pick me up in county jail that I ran into this man who told me the story of the coffee bean. And he basically told me I had 3 choices in the pot of boiling water that's called life. Be like a carrot that turns soft in boiling water, an egg that becomes hard in the boiling water, or a coffee bean, which changes the pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee. And he told me that you have a choice in life. You can let life beat you down. You can let life make you harden, or you can change life with the power inside you. Like the coffee bean had the power to change the water with the power inside it. In fact, the last words he ever said to me, Chris, were be a coffee bean. And that's exactly what I did. I went into a Texas Supermax prison, one of the most difficult places on the planet to live in, most dangerous places to live in. And I transformed not only myself inside that prison, but I transformed the entire prison around me. So much so that 7 years into this life sentence, the parole board, and parole is a device they have in prison where they can release you from prison early. Now, you're not done with your sentence, you're just done with the part you'll do inside of a prison. But the parole board in Texas comes to see me 7 years in. They want to talk to the guy that didn't just change himself, but change one of the toughest prisons in Texas. And they let me go. They let me go on condition that I would be on parole for the rest of my life. So I'm on parole until the year 2073, which means every month I have to check in with my parole officer in Texas until the year 2073. But in exchange for that, I've got this incredible life now, Chris, where I get to go out and change the world around me with the power inside me, with the story that's inside me. Literally, I'm living out the coffee bean in real time because I've got this incredible story of this guy that had it all, threw it all away, and got this incredible message, and then literally transformed the entire world around him. And that's what I'm doing to this day, Chris. I get to go out and change people's lives with a story that brings hope to the hopeless. And I think that's the thing that we all look for in life. We look for ways to be inspired, and we look for ways to find hope in other people's journeys. And if someone can translate that to us and tell us how they did it, that's even more effective. And that's really what I do in my presentations. I tell the audience, as you heard in the place where we spoke in Hershey, how I did it, because I truly believe if I can do it in there, you can do it out here, Chris.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience podcast with Damon West. If you like what you're hearing and you want to listen to some other episodes of the podcast, please go to ninthgradeexperience.com. You can find all of our previous episodes there. You can search for different topics or different themes of what you're looking for. If you're looking for something related to athletics or academics or clubs, all those other things. So you can search for that in the search bar at the site. You can also find all the clips of our episodes on a lot of our social media channels. We're really trying to get a lot out there on TikTok. So that's at Ninth Grade Experience. We can listen on Instagram at Ninth Grade Experience as well. And on YouTube, you can just search Ninth Grade Experience, and we have full-length episodes and the YouTube shorts there as well too. So lots of different ways to interact with our content. So hopefully you're enjoying this episode, and we're going to get back and finish up hearing the story of Damon West.
And one of the things you were mentioning about the parole during that time, and I really liked the story about like what you said to the parole officer at the time. And she said, it was a question that basically changed her life because it allowed you to kind of get out. And, she asked you, what do you want to be like when you leave? Kind of, I'm paraphrasing, and your answer was useful. And like that stuck with me because, being useful. So one, what does being useful mean to you? And two, if you're, people that are listening to this are in high school or parents of high schoolers or even like teachers in high school, like what do you have for like recommendations for high schoolers to be useful?
Great question. And I'm so glad you asked this. And literally, we didn't prep for this one. So I'm excited that you asked this. No, seriously, here's why. Because being useful to me is about being a servant to other people, serving other people. It's what I think is the secret to life. It's where I found the secret sauce inside of a prison. It's called servant leadership. Servant leadership is helping other people reach their goals in life, helping to raise other people up to a different station of life. Because here's what I truly believe, Chris. When we help each other, when we help other people out, we actually help ourselves too. That's how we grow as human beings. And if I'm going to be useful, I've got to look for ways to serve people every day. I got to be on the lookout for someone that's coming in need. The three hardest words for a human being to say to another human being: I need help. I need help. It's the hardest thing for people to say, but the truth is, we all need help from time to time. The truth is, we all struggle from time to time. But if you will go out in life and look for ways to help other people, people don't have to tell you they need help all the time for you to know they need help, right? You see people struggling out there. As a coffee bean, I'm looking for ways to make people feel more included in a group. Like if you're in school and you're a kid listening to this, right? You're a young adult listening to this, you're a teenager. If a coffee bean saw another student sitting by themselves in the cafeteria, the coffee bean goes up and sits with that person or brings them over to the table to sit with their friends, right? We don't want people to feel isolated and alone. That's the worst thing in the world. If a coffee bean sees a kid by themselves at recess that no one's talking to, no one's playing with, go play with that kid. Bring them into your friend circle. Listen to what that kid has to say. A lot of times in life, people just want to feel like they've been heard, Chris. I think that's one of the fundamental parts of communication that we sometimes miss. We're waiting for our opportunity to speak, when if we would just stop and listen to what people have to say. People want to be heard. And when you feel like you've been heard, then you feel like you're part of something bigger than you. Then you'll go out there and work harder to be part of that group. But we've got to try to bring everybody into this group. Now, if you're an adult listening to this means that, when you see people out there in society, social media is one of these crazy worlds out there where most things you see are not even real. But one of the things I see that people take part in social media is they gossip. There's gossip, there's keyboard warriors, people that say stuff out there they would never say to your face. Do not participate in gossip. That's character assassination. You don't want to do that, because here's the truth about people who gossip. When you're not around, they're talking about you. Because if you're the one that they're sitting there telling you about someone else every time you're there listening to them, when you walk away, they're talking about you too. So as a coffee bean, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, a standard at which we want to be out there and be useful to the people. We're looking for ways to serve other people, but we're also not participating in negative entertainment, negative talk, negative gossiping. We don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of the message is stuff that we talk about all the time. And with our last question here, like one of the other things that you talked about during the presentation was fighting all the fights, which you literally had to do when you were in prison. But I think the most important part of that message is, we're not condoning fighting, but you had to in your position. But the part about getting back up after the fight, and even like what you just said about telling people that you need help, I think those two things kind of really come together. So as our last message for, for people that are listening, like for you, if you're telling people, like, what does it mean or what does it look like to get up after the fight and the importance of asking for help in that situation?
Yeah, man, this is so important. And the guy that told me the story of the coffee bean, he told me the truth about fighting. And then he said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. Now, he was referring obviously to me going to prison, which was a very dangerous and violent place. But the overarching message of that is that you're going to get knocked down in life. Life is hard. Life is going to knock you down. And you're going to lose some of your battles in life. I'm not talking about fist fights. I'm just talking about your daily battles. People struggle, man. I struggle all the time. Here's the deal. You don't have to win. No one's that good. No one wins all their battles in life. Everybody loses fights. But here's what people watch to see. People don't count wins and losses of other people. First of all, people don't have the attention span to pay attention to someone else like that. Think about how much you pay attention to other people's lives. You don't pay attention to that much. But people do watch to see, does he or she get back up after they've been knocked down? And to me, that's the real victory in life, right, Chris? I mean, If you get knocked down 8 times, get up 9. And if you can pull yourself up after every time you get knocked down by life, whatever life throws at you, you are winning. That's what the win is. No one counts wins and losses in the way you think, but everybody watches to see if you get back up. And if you get back up every time, you're winning every time. And here's what it does too. It helps you with your confidence. And confidence is the promises that we make to ourselves that we keep. That's how you create confidence in life, right? We talk about people with low self-esteem, low confidence. Make little bitty promises to yourself every day and keep those little bitty promises. Make them small at first and keep those promises. And once you do that, you become a more confident person because you keep the promises to yourself. But if you don't keep the promises to yourself, your confidence level goes down with that too. It's directly related to the promises you make to yourself that you keep.
And I loved all the messages of confidence and change and getting back up and helping other people. And I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to kind of catch up. And, obviously I will have the book, and I talked about the book in my classes. I have a copy of the book here, The Coffee Bean. So, you're all over the internet. We'll make sure that we put all that stuff out there. But I want to thank you so much for taking some time out today. I know you're in the middle of going all across the country here, doing your speaking stuff. So I really appreciate you, sharing your message, sharing part of your story, and hopefully impacting some of our students and students all, whoever are listening to this, and they're, people that care for them too. So thanks a lot for joining us today.
Chris, thanks for the opportunity, man. And thank you for helping me fix my business whenever you didn't really know you were doing that in the first place. That's why when you did that last week, I felt like there's an obligation to you because I think that we were put in the same room for a reason, brother. So I'm glad we got to do this today.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. For all of our previous episodes, go to www.ninthgradeexperience.com.